Hey guys, it's Q&A Tuesday. So today is the third episode of Q&A Tuesdays, and this is where I'm actually going to start to take some of the questions off the last two videos that I posted. The first two videos that I taped, I actually took questions that I've had asked of me before from my clients. Now, I was really happy and excited to get the kind of feedback that I was getting on the last two videos that I posted and the amount of questions that came through. So I'm going to go back to episode 1 now, and I'm going to see some of the questions that were on there. Here's a good question on my first episode from an account called Stuff Station 1. Great new format, thank you. Question, state of the watch industry in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of retail pricing. It's a really good question. Where's the watch market going? How are these watches going to be priced? Because it seems like lately watch retail prices have climbed through the roof. You got, plain chronographs from Audemars Piguet and stainless steel retailing for $26,000 versus 10 years being at around 11 to 12. They're almost doubled in the last 10 years. Well, here's my take on things, and it has to do with a couple of things. Obviously, one is inflation. Inflation does grow, prices do go up, cost of material, cost of labor, all those things are to be taken into consideration, especially if you're talking about a 5 to 10 year time period. Taking that aside, and that can be easily figured out just by looking at retail prices 10 years ago. I still have the old retail prices going back 15 years, and if you compare the two, you're going to see that in the last 10 years, they've pretty much doubled. So you actually can expect probably the same thing over the next 5 to 10 years. However, I feel that that may not be the case over the next 10 years because of how much the watch industry has grown. There's a reason why majority of the watch companies out there allow guys like myself to sell their stuff on the internet. It's because of exposure. It's because of the internet boom in the last 10 to 15 years that the watch retail prices have actually gone up tremendously because the popularity has gone up. Before, it used to be that old, white glove guy sitting in the boutique somewhere, very exclusive, very uptight kind of feel where an average Joe was actually intimidated walking into a watch boutique. Now it's accessible. You go on your phone, you pull up a website, luxurybazaar.com, and you say, oh, here are all these watches. Oh, they're selling at a discount. Great. It's a lot more accessible. Oh, you got a return policy. Great. Let me look at it. I don't like it. I'll send it back to you. Kind of like shopping on Amazon nowadays. What is going to keep the prices at bay is the better question. Well, if you look at some of the manufacturers right now, unfortunately, most of them are trying to cut out the middle guy, and that is the authorized dealers. That is the brick and mortar store. Why? Well, because those brick and mortar stores are suffering because we're in the age of the Amazons, the eBays, and the internet overall. So what's happening? The manufacturers are saying, well, wait a minute. The middle guys are not doing that much business. Let's shift the business focus onto our boutiques. If an average brand is about a 40 to 45% off brand to an authorized dealer, and that authorized dealer will in turn sell it to a consumer, he may give him a discount, he may not, depending on the model. So a normal market from the manufacturer to the dealer is about 6 to 7 times fold. If they manufacture a watch at $100, they'll sell that watch off for $600, $700. Now, does this mean they make $600 on every watch that they sell? No, because they have a whole lot of other costs involved, such as marketing, boutiques, and so on and so forth. Then the authorized dealer in turns and sells that, let's say, for about double if his cost is $45 up, and if he sold it at a retail price. That is the amount of money that the manufacturer is leaving on the table. Let's take that same watch, throw it into a manufacturer's boutique, and now they're selling this watch at full retail to a walk-in client, bypassing the middle guy. They just made double the margins. It's a hell of a deal, don't you think? With having that, it gives them more money and allows them to keep the prices at bay.
But wait! There's more!
I guess another factor worth mentioning in terms of retail pricing real quick is the currencies. It really all depends on global economies. When the euro was at $1.60 to the dollar versus what, $1.17 or 18 today, it was a big deal. Prices kept climbing, and they kept climbing because the market was hot. This was prior to the financial crisis in 2008. So what was happening? The market was hot, things were flying off the shelves. So what are they going to do? Normally they would decrease prices in one area or increase it in the other. Well, with the euro going to 160 and the retail prices being much higher in Europe versus United States, products would go from US to Europe because Europeans were buying 1.5 to 1. When the euro dropped back down, obviously the prices had to adjust. So at some point, they actually ended up lowering the prices in Europe. I don't foresee us having a huge financial crisis like we did in 2008 in the near future. However, if that were to happen, that could affect retail pricing drastically, either up or down. Next question comes from a gentleman by the name of Steve Muzz. Awesome video as usual, thank you. Any insight on Roger Dubuis? I used to be a big fan, and they did the massive switch up and discontinued their popular models and came out with an insane price increase. Secondary, they're taking a huge beating, however. I still want to get a double tourbillon, but I fear I will be married to it forever. And then if the company folds, service will be pretty much near impossible. Normally I play it safe with AP, however, the Roger Dubuis model in question is pretty interesting. You know what? I'm gonna get those Roger Dubuis models. Give me a second. Nice. Can you do me a favor? Can you bring me the Roger Dubuis double tourbillon, both the older model and the new skeleton one?
Yeah.
All right, thanks. I guess we'll wait on that. But while we're waiting for her to bring me those two watches, here's the thing about Roger Dubuis. I remember when I first started out in the business, I remember attending my first trade show. I was very green in the business, and I had another dealer that came to my case and said, hey, let's do some trading. I have these really complicated Roger Dubuis watches. I want to trade you pennies on a dollar. I looked at the watch like, wow, this seems like a good deal. I'm getting an $80,000 watch. It's going to cost me, after the trade and all said and done, about 20 cents on a dollar. I should do all of these on it. And I actually, on the internet, and I actually did. What happened? The underlying story, which I found out a couple of years later, there was a distributor that took care of North and South America that worked with Roger Dubuis. Now, I mentioned earlier the model manufacturer, authorized dealer, consumer. A lot of the brands did and still do manufacturer to distributor to authorized dealer to consumer. They followed that business model, and that was the case with Roger Dubuis. What this guy did, though, is rather than, and just to put it in a simple perspective, let's hypothetically, the cost to the distributor was 75 off, he sold it to dealers at 50 off, and then they sold it for whatever. This guy, rather than doing his job as a true distributor should, by distributing these watches among authorized dealers, opening up new doors, opening up new dealers, advertising the watches in magazines and billboards and so on and so forth, doing events, rather he said, you know what, I'm going to make a quick flip. He put in a few $1,000,000, took the big order from the company and started backdooring everything. Backdooring things to guys like me, backdooring things to other dealers and so on and so forth, therefore killing the value of the brand. Because if he bought the stuff at 75 off and he was selling the stuff off at 70 off, making his quick 5 points, on millions of dollars worth of inventory, he made a quick dollar and got his money out fairly quickly. But the end result is it killed the brand, and it took Roger Dubuis such a long time to get their image back. Because at the end of the day, Roger Dubuis makes unbelievable watches. The quality of the movements are great. In fact, the Roger Dubuis Diver Chrono watch, that movement is the same movement that went into a Patek Philippe 5070. I mean, big deal, great manufacturer, unbelievable movements. Can't say enough about them. Gorgeous looking watches, in fact. The ladies' pieces were wonderful. And today, they're still, believe it or not, 15 some years later, still trying to get over that hump of, oh, Roger Dubuis don't keep their value because the retail price is so high. And, you know, when you buy them, you end up losing half your shirt when you go to resell them or trade them back in. It is true. I'm one of the guys that will tell you, listen, if you buy a particular Roger Dubuis watch, you will lose an arm and a leg. However, today, Roger Dubuis has come down to earth. They've come up with newer tourbillon skeleton models. They retail for a reasonable amount of price. You got the collab with Lamborghini, the tourbillons that they just made. They're absolutely gorgeous. They're flying off the shelves, and they're not discounting more than 30% or sometimes even 25%, and dealers can't get enough of them because everybody wants them. They're absolutely gorgeous, and they're actually affordable. Oh, there she is. This is the skeleton and the old guy. Thanks, nice. So here are the tourbillons. I'll show them to you in a second. So to go back to what I was saying, Roger Dubuis has realized that they need to come down with their retail prices, make more kick-ass timepieces such as the Lambo watch I just showed you, and that will be successful. There's no failure in the formula that they're going forth with. Better looking watches, same great movements, lower retail prices. So it's quite opposite to your question. It actually did go in the wave. It went, they were high initially, they went even higher, and now they're slowly but surely dropping their watch. So to answer your question, should you actually buy yourself a double tourbillon? Well, let me show you one. Here's their newer version, Excalibur double tourbillon skeleton. This watch is jaw-dropping. There's not much to say about this watch. Again, I mentioned that Roger Dubuis makes absolutely gorgeous watches. This double tourbillon is no exception. And it does carry a hefty price tag, but it actually should. It's just a double tourbillon skeleton in a precious metal. If you look at any other manufacturer, they're going to charge an arm and a leg for a double tourbillon just the same. And this is in line with all the other ones. This retails for $330,000, like the Brigade tourbillon does, double tourbillon. And again, there's no shame. This retail price is actually on par. Now, the older version of this watch, this is the one that you actually can take a bath on. So this is the older version of the double tourbillon. It's got the mother of pearl dial. It's got the retrograde minutes going across the top. The reason this guy didn't hold its value very well is because initially when they first put it out, it kept breaking. The retrograde had issues until they finally fixed it. A lot of them had to go back and get refixed. And now this one is actually fully serviced. I wouldn't have bought this watch if it wasn't fully serviced from Roger Dubuis, because it would be a headache to actually fix this particular double tourbillon. By case in point, you're picking this watch around $70,000, where this guy, you're still only getting about 35 to 40% off retail on the brand new piece. And I think the last part of your question was if the company ever goes under, these things would be very difficult to fix. Well, for one, let me tell you my projection. Roger Dubuis is not going anywhere. Roger Dubuis has been around for years, and it's going to be around for years. But in the case it did go under, just because a manufacturer does not exist doesn't mean you can't get a watch fixed. There's plenty of talented watchmakers out there. I work with a bunch of them. It's much cheaper, it's much more effective, and it's much more faster than actually sending something to the manufacturer. Okay, this is becoming like a what's on my desk at this point. I'm gonna take a last question and I'll get out of here, so I won't keep you guys long. Next question comes from Bony Wony. I don't know if that's even pronounced right, but it says, great idea on a new series. Thank you again. What do you think about Homage pieces? Do you think they're just blatant copies or great pieces to own? Well, this is sort of a trick question, and again, I'm going to go back to what I always say, you buy what you like first and foremost. But there are two ways you can look at homage pieces. One is they're actually paying homage to a watch that was made 50 or 100 years ago, because majority of these companies go back hundreds of years. Or two, they just kind of ran out of things to put out there, and they want to create a hype about a particular model and make yet another limited edition. Those are the two ways to look at it. And at the end of the day, it comes down to what you like first and foremost. It's about how you feel about aesthetically about that particular watch. Now, notice with that said, you don't have Rolex doing any homage pieces. You don't have companies like AP doing any homage pieces. These brands may come out with something like an anniversary piece, but it'll be a brand new watch. It will not be a copy of a watch that was made 100 years ago with slight variations, usually to the movement or some visual things. I actually like homage watches, and the reason I like homage watches is because vintage watches appeal to me. So I guess to name a homage watch off the top of my head, the Jaeger Reversa, that was a homage to the original Reversa that was made back in the day. Of course, there were key differences there, you know, in the Reversa movement itself, as well as aesthetically in terms of dials and so on and so forth, but that was the homage to the original Reversa. And I actually did an episode on that, of what's on my desk, if you guys want to watch that. It's actually some pretty interesting facts on that. Panerai tends to make a lot of homage watches, but lately there's been some scandals where there's discrepancies in the actual history of the watches, where some guys out there writing up the fact that the homage watch they made was actually not that of an Italian diver. It was made for somebody else, and so on and so forth. But bottom line is I think that all watches are great, to include homage watches. Lang & Son did a homage trio, tourbillon, as well as a power reserve, and there was a datograph. They did it in what they called honey gold, different shade of gold. And I did like those pieces as well. For those that like history behind the watches, and I'm one of those people, homage watches are great. It represents your interest in the history of a particular manufacturer and how far they go back in history. So the answer is really simple. If you like homage watches, there's nothing wrong with it, because you should buy what you like first and foremost. Guys, I want to thank you for joining me, and I mostly want to thank you guys for all your questions. Again, I apologize if I didn't get to your specific questions. I will do my best to either answer them in the comments or in the next episode. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel, go ahead and subscribe. And remember, post your questions below this video, and I will try to get to them and answer them on the next episode. Until next time.